you are taking a look at some of the video just coming in out of Damascus here, provided by Fox News, as an American who turned up in Syria today says he was detained after crossing into the country by foot on a Christian pilgrimage 7 months ago. Travis Timmerman appears to have been among thousands of people released from the country's prisons after rebels reached Damascus over the weekend, overthrowing President Bashar Assad and ending his family's 54-year rule. As video emerged online of Timmerman on Thursday, he was initially mistaken by some for Austin Tice, an American journalist who went missing in Syria 12 years ago. I want to discuss the developing news right here, so let's bring in Bill Roggio, a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Thank you so much for taking the time, as always, to be here with us.
Always a pleasure, Josh. Thank you very much.
And Bill, I do want to ask you, because again, all of this is developing at this hour, but it sounds as though dozens, maybe hundreds of people have been released there, including at least one American. So how significant is that overall to see these people freed after, honestly, it's unclear how long they were there?
Yes, it is interesting, and it's very significant that this American was released. There's thousands, tens of thousands of prisoners that were held under the brutal Assad regime. Many were tortured and beaten. It is, I wasn't even aware of the American who was captured, that he was in custody. So you have to wonder how many other Westerners may have been caught up in Assad's campaign to just detain anyone who worries him. Now, Austin Tice, that's interesting. There has been no proof of life from him, so it's really difficult to assess whether we're going to be able to find him. He's been missing since 2000, and I believe it was 2011 or 2012, and it's tough to imagine that he still might be alive.
One thing that's interesting is over the last week, as we saw the fall of Syria's president, we heard a lot about Austin Tice. So for folks who maybe aren't familiar with who he is, can you kind of break that down for the people watching right now?
Yes, he's a former Marine officer, and he's served as a reporter in Syria. He's one of the first to report from Syria on the rebel groups. When he disappeared, no rebel organization, and many of these are jihadist organizations, claimed credit for him. I would have expected if one of those groups took him captive, particularly a jihadist group, they would have touted this. If he was captured, for instance, by the Islamic State, they would have plastered him all over their media. And as we remember, they were executing Western captives at that time. So he's thought to be held by the Assad regime, but we haven't seen any evidence of his capture. It's unknown if he's still alive. The U.S. has pressed the Assad regime in the past to to release him, and the Syrian government, they said that they were unaware of his whereabouts. So, it's a cautionary tale for any American who wants to go into a combat zone unprotected. These are very, very dangerous places. I've been to them in Iraq and Afghanistan as a reporter, but I made sure I would embed with U.S. forces.
As it has been almost a week since the downfall of Syria's president, I want to ask you kind of a broad overall question. What do we expect at this point is the future for Syria? Do we have any idea at this point? Again, we are just a week out from the fall of the president, and his family did have a more than 50-year rule. So what can you tell me about that?
Yeah, it's very difficult to assess what's going to happen in the future. I mean, very few people, I'm not aware of anyone who would have predicted Assad's rapid collapse. So there's very little information out there as far as, how this may play out. I can, in my estimation, you're probably going to see, at least in the short term, perhaps to the midterm, a balkanized Syria with the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, the former al-Qaeda branch that still has ties to al-Qaeda and jihadist groups. They're going to consolidate their control along that M5 highway with the major cities that runs from Aleppo to Damascus. That will be their effort. The Syrian National Army, which is backed by Turkey, is going to try to consolidate positions up in the north, and it's going to take the fight to the U.S.-backed Syrian Democratic Forces, which honestly really is the PKK or the Kurdistan Workers' Party, which is also a U.S. Foreign terrorist organization. So and the Syrian National Army is going against the Syrian Democratic Forces because they're backed by Turkey, and the Turks don't like the Kurds. The PKK is responsible for tens of thousands of casualties in Turkey in the past. So I think you're going to see, what's one possibility here, Josh, is that Hayat Tahrir al-Sham sits out that battle between the PKK or the SDF and the Syrian National Army, and they may come in and sweep up the pieces. It's very difficult to assess, but I could see those scenarios playing out.
Israel has said that its military, just during a 48-hour period, actually eliminated somewhere between 70 and 80% of Syria's military capabilities. Do we know why they went about doing that? But also, what sort of impact could all of this have on Israel? As you mentioned, it's unclear what the future of Syria even is. So do we have a grasp on what could happen in Israel, or is that still kind of up in the air as well?
The only happened with Israel question, the Israelis, basically what they've traded here, at least in the short term, is a brutal Assad regime that was allowing Iranian black militias and supporting Hezbollah to use Syria as a transit and support zone for attacks against Israel. So that's gone. But now you have, at least in the areas that are going to connect this to Israel, a jihadist organization that is no friend of Israel and that is more than willing and is riding high from conquering the Assad regime. So it's curious to see if they will be attacking Israel. As far as the targeting, the Israelis launched these strikes to keep these hands out of these jihadist groups, out of all of these groups. It's unknown. And plus, these weapons could just be taken and sold across the border to Hezbollah. So that's their motivation for doing that. They launched scores, hundreds of airstrikes against, I believe it was 450 different targets that they hit, chemical weapons facilities, research facilities, the former Syrian Navy, anti-aircraft missile batteries, Scud missiles, tanks, helicopters, aircraft, armored personnel carriers, you name it. If the Israelis could identify it, and this was a spectacular operation, Josh, they pivoted. They've been at war in both Gaza and Lebanon and quickly pivoted to take out Assad's hardware. It's quite impressive.
Bill Roggio, thank you so much for taking the time to join us and break it all down. Obviously, a lot of developments here over just the last week, and we can expect even more in the near future. Thank you again for taking the time to join us and break it all down. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Josh. Merry Christmas and happy holidays to all.
Merry Christmas and happy holidays.